and will pass it on to our kids.
Since 1967, Israel has been establishing illegal settlements on hilltops. Over time, they expand at the expense of Palestinians.
The Sufan family says they will not leave their home on the hill. For them, this is how they experience Israeli military occupation, violent attacks, illegal settlements, and land grabs. Let's now move to the center of the occupied West Bank in Qalandi refugee camp, where for one family, the occupation means tragic losses of life.
It was a bittersweet moment when Sami's new grandson was born in 2005. They named him Yasser after his uncle, who was killed by Israeli forces 4 years before.
We wanted him to bring joy to the house. I was happy. He was born in Jordan and I traveled there to meet him.
But in 2023, and just a few weeks before turning 18, Yasser was buried in the same gravesite as his namesake, both killed by the same army. Not only them, Sami's sons Samir and Muhammad were also killed by Israeli forces in 2002 and 2015.
We do not bring children to this life to die, but to live. We want to be able to live in peace and have a good life. I lost my sons when they were very young. They were 11, 15 and 17 years old.
Not every Palestinian family shares this heavy loss of life, but the occupation still takes a toll on people one way or another. Let's go now to Hebron in the south of the occupied West Bank and see how life there has been brought to a halt.
Once brimming with life and a bustling economy, life is fading away in the old city of Hebron. Now, it's a mere echo of what it once was.
The markets are dead. No visitors, no foreigners. We don't find customers for the goods we buy and are in debt for.
The 75-year-old sells Palestinian kufiyas, local artisans, a symbol of the city's rich cultural heritage.
I've been here for 17 years. We keep thinking it will get a bit better. Instead, every year it gets worse and worse. People are scared. They're humiliated at the checkpoints, so they avoid this area altogether.
The sun is setting here in Hebron, the economic capital of the occupied West Bank. The city still has a few hours before it goes to sleep. People are shopping and working. But the sun has set way earlier in the old city of Hebron.
Palestinians say time too is a victim of occupation. Lost in queues, alternative routes, checkpoints and closures. Time stolen from a nation stuck in waiting. Nida Ibrahim, Al Jazeera, the occupied West Bank.
Well, let's cross to Zain Basravi, who's joining us now from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. And Zain, occupation looks the same no matter where you are, really, in the Palestinian territory.
That is correct. The Palestinians we've been speaking to say, while everyone experiences it differently, the existential crisis of living under occupation remains the same. And watching the hearings at the International Court of Justice, they say while it is politically significant, practical steps need to be taken immediately to stop the daily killing of Palestinians in occupied territories in Gaza. Joining me now is Dr. Laith Humbali, a physician and community health researcher. Sir, thank you very much for joining us. We've seen the peak violence in Gaza that is ongoing now. We've seen one of the most potent symptoms of the occupation has been attacks on healthcare infrastructure in Gaza. How consequential are the conversations happening at the ICJ to try and impact what's happening in Gaza now, to try to bring that to a close?
Yeah. Well, the Israeli army has so far surrounded, besieged, and bombed and put out of service over 2/3 of hospitals in the Gaza Strip and over 70% of primary healthcare facilities in the Gaza Strip. The people of Gaza have no fully functional hospitals left, and they only have minimally functioning hospitals that are now there for them to seek service in. Israel has killed over 400 workers in healthcare institutions. It did all of those things deliberately, knowingly, with high precision weapons, knowing the damage that that will do and knowing the fact that it will continue to be able to commit those crimes with total impunity. So the fact that Israel, receives warning after warning, discourse after discourse, ruling after ruling, saying that all of the various practices that it commits under occupation and colonialism are illegal or morally wrong, the fact remains that Israel has not faced any meaningful consequences, and there is no sign that it will face any meaningful consequence as a result of international law institutions such as the International Court of Justice. And it does those things knowing the harm that it will do to Palestinians and face no consequence. So the attacks on healthcare are deliberate with the aim of dispossessing Palestinians, moving them off of their lands and completing the ethnic cleansing that started in 1948. It's calculated, and as you say, there are no practical steps that we have seen as a result of these hearings.
That's true. So even if there's a moral victory, as long as people continue to die, that doesn't have the same impact or value that it probably should. I'd like to also talk about the occupied West Bank. It has not been spared, this uptick in the intensity of the violence being carried out by the Israeli military. Just a few weeks ago in Jenin, 3 brothers were killed in their hospital beds. This really does give us a sense of the insidious nature of the occupation with these targeted killings inside hospitals. Can you talk a little bit about the experience of the occupied West Bank as well?
Absolutely, and it's obviously the occupied West Bank, including places like Jenin and Tul Karim, which have their infrastructure destroyed on an almost daily basis, which obviously will have impact on people's health if sewage is interrupted, water supply and electricity supply is interrupted. But it also takes effect whether through the attacks on healthcare, through the displacement and dispossession that takes place in the Jordan Valley, in Jerusalem, in Masafer Yatta, or every other Palestinian town and city, or also, with Palestinian citizens of Israel in the Naqab who are also displaced, whose basic services are also cut off. So that insidious attack that you talk about, that impacts every aspect of Palestinian livelihood, whether it's in healthcare or in any other basic service that leads to either ill health or good health, is something that Palestinians experience and suffer under every single day. And that is why the fundamental question should be about how to end colonialism, how to dismantle colonial institutions, how to end the occupation as a way to advance people's health and well-being. That is the fundamental question here. It's all connected to colonialism and that constant violence that it subjects Palestinians to.
And Doctor, just briefly, a third question came to mind. If you could just go back to Gaza for a moment, the massive destruction we've seen of the healthcare infrastructure. Just briefly, could you describe what kind of a challenge is it now to rebuild, to rehabilitate those that survive if and when the fighting stops?